More money, you got less problems. At least minor ones, all your basics accounted for. Team elite I run with, I'm guaranteed to be Final Four. Less money, you got more problems. More money, you got less problems.
Good evening, the back community, bringing Albany community's knowledge. Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. Tonight of all nights is a night, could be looked at as a night of celebration, could be looked at as a night of healing. Either which way, we will get into that topic a little bit later. Tonight's guest that we have, the back community, is Mr. Patrick Williams himself. Pat, thank you for allowing me to interview you tonight, and I look forward to diving into your story, bro.
Man, thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you're doing in Albany, but then also I know, people see this that are not out. I see it. I'm not here in Albany, so I really do appreciate the work that you're doing, brother.
Okay. Listen, man. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. It's a labor of love. One, because Albany is truly a huge part of my heart. So it doesn't matter where I'm at in the world. I always end up trying to figure out what I can do for Albany. So this podcast, this project in particular, has been really fulfilling for me, because I just know that there's so many positive stories, just like yourself, of people from Albany that were doing or are doing great things, and their stories sometimes get overshadowed by a lot of the negativity that's going on in Albany, and people think that the only products that come out of Albany is negativity, and that's incorrect. So, right. Yeah, like I said, man, I look forward to diving into your story. I'm gonna hit you with your first unofficial question, though. We have now survived over a year of COVID-19 officially. We've lost over 560,000 people. But how have you and your family been surviving through this global pandemic, Pete?
We're okay. So I don't, it's me and my wife and our two children. We have a 3-year-old, almost he'll be 4 in September, and then we have a 1-year-old as well, and he'll be 2 in July. Nice. So all of us, we're house hunting, which that is a whole market right now. Is crazy. So, we're trying to get in, because we definitely need some more space. And that's been it. I work in the school system, so I'm in Trenton, which is the capital of New Jersey. It's very much similar. Thing about Albany, it's very similar to Albany and its makeup. And I work for the Trenton School District as a school social worker. So this year has been very different, and it's been very tough in some ways, and then easier in other ways. So it's hard to do this virtual learning thing. A lot of my fellow teachers, fellow educators are, really, I would say, just really holding it down the best they can, and really doing the best they can with this virtual learning. Me as a social worker, I do, individual counseling for students. My wheelhouse is older kids. This year, I got pulled out of the high school, and now I'm doing elementary all the way up, right? Okay. And that's been different. It's also been kind of just heavy sometimes, because you get to know these kids, and you get to know their parents. And now with new challenges, like I got, you have some parents that, they require assistance, and it's like, there's only so much you can do. There's only so many resources you can give folks. And it's kind of like everybody's been hurting, especially in the beginning of the pandemic. It was kind of hard because everybody was kind of struggling. Now I think that, one, more supports are there, and then also things are starting to slowly open up. So there's still a need. Yeah, I would say it's definitely a lot less shocking, than it was in the beginning of the pandemic. As far as outside of professional life, me and my wife, during the pandemic, my son was, my 3-year-old was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So he's high functioning autism. And there's some things we deal with there. He's speech delayed. He has some sensory issues. You know, there's just some food sensitivity stuff. And so getting him services, especially getting him services in the pandemic, you know, it's been a journey. I'll say that it's been a journey, but you know, we're very blessed and very thankful that one, we know how to navigate the system, and then two, there are people who have helped us kind of along the way. And so that's been something. And just, you know, we got 2 toddlers, you know,
man.
And we're trying to keep them, you know, entertained and have enough experiences. Like my wife looked over to me like a couple months ago and she was just like, you know what? I think PJ's my oldest, Patrick Jr., and then Price is my youngest. And she looked at me and she was just like, she's like, I don't think Price has ever been in a grocery store. And we were wow, that's true. Because also, like, me and my wife we're the only ones here in Jersey. And so she's from Mississippi. You know, I born in Georgia, grew up between Georgia and Albany, New York. So nobody has family here. So it's like our church family and us, but then also kind of like, you know, not everybody's quarantining at the same level. So it's kind of, and also we're real particular about, you know, who we leave our children with anyway. So, and then everybody else kind of is added burden kind of thing with the whole pandemic thing. So we don't really have a babysitter. Like, we are so happy that our parents got vaccinated because we like, yes, take these, come on up, get these kids, like, give us a couple hours. So it's been a journey, but we've been able to manage it. I will say one of the greatest things, you know, that I look forward to, I love the fact that I have been here. You know, think about, remember that movie Pursuit of Happiness?
Yes.
Smith and his son, and you know, his son was homeless. The real guy, I remember, got interviewed, and his son got interviewed by Oprah. And I remember Oprah asking the son, she was like, you know, did you know you guys were homeless? And he was like, no, I didn't know we were poor. I didn't know we were homeless. All I knew is that my dad was there all the time. And like, I can remember back a couple years ago when, you know, I was working a job. My wife is a stay-at-home mom, and she does phenomenal with what she's doing and everything. So I hold down kind of like the job aspect. And I remember it got to a point where I was working, I was doing Lyft. And so I was literally coming home, eating something, getting in the car, and then driving all night. And my oldest one, he started calling me, and I think this is before we had Price. I left so much, he started calling me bye-bye instead of, and that hurt me. And so one of the greatest things I could say about this pandemic is like, I'm home. So, and even in the days now, I'm having to go in certain days, but even in those times, like, they get to see me almost all the time. So I love the fact that, you know, you have that experience. So it definitely hasn't been all bad, you know.
Okay. I actually, you made me think about something that Jason Coleman had said in one of my earlier interviews, and he was just saying that the pandemic has actually given him and his family an opportunity to spend more time with one another, because he's typically on the road, he was typically on the go, and he was like, man, I would have never thought I would have this much time to spend with my family. So there's plenty of positives that have happened during the pandemic, as well as negatives to counter those. But, you know, I mean, as my pastor says at my church, he always say, you know, if we come out of this the same way that we went into it, we must have been doing something wrong with our time.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but yeah, there's we've been blessed through the pandemic, both through negatives and positives, but we've tried to find some creative ways to come out of this better. So thank you for opening up on that one with you and your family on that one. And I'm glad that you guys are safe. I'm glad that you're not bye-bye anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And
now, my youngest one, when he sees me coming through the door now, he'll say, Daddy!
Yeah.
So
that's what matters most, man. Family matters first. I mean, family matters most. And sometimes, even as my shirt would say, you know what I mean, choose you first. You know what I mean? So, you know what I mean, we got to choose ourselves and spend our time appropriately. But Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, man. Actually, I think you already answered question one. So you answered question one. So I'm gonna hit you with my favorite question that I ask all interviewees. Pat, what's your favorite place to visit in Albany and why?
Oh man. So it's changed over the years. Years. When I was living there, it was Soul Kitchen.
I would expect that from you.
Soul Kitchen. That was my hangout spot. That's where I got my start in writing poetry and spitting and performing. Now I'm coming back. I would love, and I hated that we couldn't do it last time, especially having kids. The New York State Museum is like one of the, now I have an opportunity to visit other museums and everything. We have one of the best museums in the country, I would say. And I would love for my kids to experience the magic of that. And also, the carousel up under the on the State Mall, on the top of the, is it in the egg? Yeah, it's in the egg, right?
Yeah, I think it's in the egg. Yeah.
Yeah. So just that, I think that's one of the things I definitely look forward to. Besides my mom's house, obviously, my mom's house. And she lives in North Albany now. But those places, I would love to, allow my children to experience that.
Okay. That has been a place that was picked a lot among. I think you might be interviewed number 30 for season 1. So.
Oh wow! Okay.
That has been a heavily picked area. So I have heard plenty of the story, so I understand why that's a favorite for you as well. And I wonder if the sandbox is still over there, man. That little park over there on the outside. Because now that was my spot. It was like, go down there and we gonna play tag, and you can't touch the sand. If you touch the sand, you out. So I was never that gifted or agile. So all the other kids, they could jump from one joint and I was too scared. I'd be like, whoop, I guess I got caught because I ain't gonna make it. But yeah.
Oh, man.
Let me see. All right, Patrick Williams, we're coming back to you. Thinking of your younger self, the younger version of you, what is something you wish someone would have told the younger Pat Williams?
Oof. One of the things I think about, so I don't know how many people know this, but it's a part of my testimony, is that, besides now I'm a licensed social worker and I have a master's in, social work and a master's in divinity from Princeton and, a bachelor's from Lamont. One of the degrees I'm most proud of myself for is my GED. I dropped out. I went to 4 different high schools in the course of 5 years. I went from LaSalle to Albany High, went to Guilderland High, then went back to Albany High, then I went to Schenectady High, and I was homeless for a time in that space, and eventually, dropped out. And that's the reason why I went to Schenectady. I was in a shelter out there, and when they kicked me out the shelter, school wasn't my priority at that point. But I wish that I had taken advantage of some of the academic opportunities I had, or just some of the clubs and some of the things that, some of my counterparts took advantage of. I was in high school. I remember, what was that? Mark Bob
Temple?
Yeah, Mark Bob Temple through those plays, that kind of thing.
Was it Too Deep Entertainment?
Too Deep Entertainment, yeah.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah. And then like I remember a friend of mine was a part of the, you know, the honor society and those kind of things. And, you know, I had the brain. I don't think I had the maturity. And I think that, and I didn't necessarily, my mother at the time was disabled. So I didn't necessarily have all the support. There were people who definitely stepped in. Shout out to my godmother, Akua Gibson, who took me into her home, you know, and, you know, my sister, my god sister, Imani and Naeem. But, you know, I didn't have all the exposure that I like. One of the things I tell people, I'm a musician in my heart, not in my hands, but definitely in my heart, I'm a musician. But I wish that I had like, you know, taken full advantage of some of the, you know, the music classes, or I frequented the Equinox at some point, and, you know, they had guitar classes and trumpet, but I wasn't concerned about that at the time. So I wish I had taken full advantage of some of those opportunities.
Okay. And I mean, and to be fair to yourself and giving yourself some grace too, it's kind of hard to focus in on that aspect of life, you know what I mean, the electives or the different things that we can add to us when we got real life situations in front of us. Absolutely. Like, I might not have no electricity at home, you know what I mean? It was like you said, there was a time period where you were homeless. So I can only imagine, you know what I mean? Like I tell anybody, and I've been saying this from the time period that I finally made it out and I got the confidence to be myself. It was just like, you know, the kids in the inner city are some of the most gifted kids. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because of what we have to face. You know what I mean? You got to face homelessness. You got to face things with your parents. You got to face streets and the gangs outside. You got to face the fact that we might not have as much money or resources. You got all of these different variables, and then we're still expected to produce educationally. We're still expected to be, you know what I mean, have good morals, have good standards, and all of these things. And it's just like, it's kind of hard to focus in on those things when I'm worrying about how I'm going to eat at night. Right. When I'm worried about I don't have no electricity. You know what I mean? I used to tell a story. Was like there was a time period where I didn't have any electricity, right? And I remember taking a long yellow extension cord from the basement, and we lived on the 3rd floor at the time, and I ran it all the way up to the 3rd floor, and I put extension cords through every room in the house, so we had electricity. You know what I mean? Right. But it was just like, you know, those types of experiences can either make and shape you or break you. Right. You know what I mean? And it's just like, but I always tell people, it's like, imagine the things that we have to experience on top of the fact that you're asking me to produce my best self academically. Sometimes it's about what comes first, and my priorities are my self-preservation comes first, and that's a last resort. And I hate to say it that way, but sometimes those situations take precedent over, like you said, you wish that you had the exposure to do those more artsy things with the music, the hands-on things, because you had the love for it. But at the same time, I had some real life situations in front of me, and I'm trying to do it. And as young people, we just we don't know how to be as supportive as we could be. And I've learned that growing up. You know what I mean? Right.
And then I will say that too, like, you know, I experienced bullying and all of that. And I will say, you know, and even because like I said, I was back and forth my whole life. So every time I moved back to Albany, my mother was in a different apartment. We were in a different neighborhood, and I was in a different school. So I attended the same school twice in Albany, except for, you know, Albany High. And then when I got to the high school, like, I'm coming from the country, like, I'm coming from Georgia, but not like Atlanta. I'm coming from my grandparents' house. Like, we had a family farm. So, you know, clothes were like, if it's clean, and if it didn't have no holes, you were good. You're like, nobody was, you know, some people, as long as you had like a pair of Nikes, and didn't have to do the Jordan Air Force Ones, you had a pair of Nikes, that was kind of it. You had some socks or whatever, maybe some Nike socks, like really check in for fashion like that. And then I move up to Albany, and it's like, You ain't got Tims? Wait, what are Tims? What do you mean? You don't know what Tims are, and you don't. And then that was around the time my mother was getting sick, so we really didn't have that much. So it was it was kind of heavy. It was kind of heavy. But I would say to piggyback off of this question, I would tell my younger self it does get better. And then also, and this is something that I took me years to learn. Failure is not something you are, it's something you do. And for years, I'm talking about almost till I was 30 years old, I thought of myself as a failure. Period. I was in Princeton Seminary, in class, or in at the lunch table with somebody from Howard and somebody from Morehouse and somebody from Spelman, and then there's somebody who went to Harvard and somebody who went here and went there. And I'm from Monye College, like this little school in Syracuse nobody knows about. I wasn't a valedictorian and all of that. So I always felt like if I'm here out of the pity of someone else, because it couldn't have been on my own merit or something I did for myself. And then I'm not good enough because I know I'm a failure. So even the good things that happen, they happen in spite of being a failure, not because I'm not a failure. You know what I mean? And I remember sitting in a college course and Donald Capps, God bless his soul, he passed away a couple years back, but they used to call him Easy A Capps. Because he give you an A. Like, what? He's gonna give you an A in his class. But he came up in the era of Vietnam. He told us why. He was like, very soft-spoken dude. You had to like lean in to hear him. And he told you why he came up in the era of Vietnam. And so as a professor teaching college kids in Vietnam, if they flunk out, they're eligible for the draft. So there was professors that said, I'm going to give my kids an A no matter what. And so he took that, as kind of his pedagogical, mission all along. So if you sent him in a paper, he will write all over it, give you a critique and, oh, this book, you can think about this. What if you're thinking about this? But in the end, he's going to give you an A in the class. We were sitting there reading a book he wrote called Losers, Loners, and Rebels. And the book was basically, he studies like pastoral care and everything. And this is when I was going into I did a dual program. So I did a Masters of Divinity and Masters of Social Work program through a partnership with Syracuse University. And so this was one of the courses at the seminary that I had to take as a part of the social work program. And so this is, I think it was pastoral care of men or pastoral care of the life cycles. And there's this book we had to read, Losers, Loners, and Rebels. And it's all about basically this idea that like a lot of people who go into clergy or a lot of people who are in leadership, especially in clergy, are either one of three categories: losers, loners, or rebels. And then it looks at the life and then examines other people like James Dean and, these other people that, he knew. But he said something during class one day. He was like, he's mumbling, we're like listening, like, and I remember I had zoned out. I'm looking at my book or I'm on my computer taking notes or whatever. And he said, failure is not something you are. Failure is just something you do. He said, everybody fails, but that doesn't mean you're a failure. That doesn't mean you're a failure. And I remember hearing that, and it was like chains started just like I felt like chains started breaking off me. And this was like 30 years, man, 30 years, because at some point I thought, as a kid, sometimes we internalize the messages our families tell us and all that kind of stuff. And, there was a running joke in my family about how lazy I was compared to my cousin who was very studious. And even now they call us hot dog hamburger. I'm Babity in my family and my cousin's Dobity. She's like, and the story is, oh, well, if you left Babity and Dobity in a room and you locked them up with some food, some work to do, Dobity wouldn't touch the food and he finished the work. Babity then ate the food and then find a way to break out the room and he's doing the work. It ain't always stuck with me. It always stuck with me. And they would compare me to a uncle, Uncle Isaac, who was, you know, he, for lack of a better term, he was alcoholic, and he didn't do much with his life. My grandma, you want to be like Uncle Isaac? And like all of these things kind of I internalized. And so even after I was starting to do good, and I went back, after me dropping out and getting I got my GED, and then I got into college, and then I graduated college. And then like I said, all along the way, you have people telling you a failure as well, because my guidance counselor, when I went back to Guilderland to get my transcripts, told my mother he's never going to make it into college. And if he makes it, he's never going to graduate. And that, I think that's a part of why I do what I do now.
Gotcha.
Because I recognize, like, I tell people I'm a hope dealer, and I'm trying to get these kids hooked. Because so many people have told them they're wrong, or they've given up on them. And I remember, after I graduated, and I'm going into, now I got into Princeton and all this kind of stuff, which I don't carry like a chip on my shoulder, because I recognize anybody could do, you know what I'm saying? Like, anybody could be in this space. It's not like I'm special or anything. But what I will say is, like, even in those places, I felt very much like a failure. And I felt the imposter syndrome. And so when he said that, it was just like, wow. Like, and it changed the way I thought about myself. It changed the way I presented myself. Okay. It changed everything. And so I still actively have to say, no, I'm not a failure. I'm this, I'm that. I'm still like coming out of that. But, it's definitely has changed the way I've seen my life and changed the trajectory of my thinking, I would say. Okay.
Listen, you said so much in that one, Pat, that, I really want to unpack. And one thing that stands out is just what you said. What you ended up saying was that it gets better later. It gets greater later. You know what I mean? And it's just like, the more mature I've become as a person, the more I've realized that, it's a level of empathy that we just don't understand as young adults. Right. Yeah. You just don't understand it. You know what I mean? You don't have the mental capacity to really understand it, because we haven't seen the world. We haven't seen as much of how devastation could ravage a family or a person. You know what I mean? Right. The older you get, you know what I mean, hopefully for some people still stay the same. But typically the older you get, the more mature you become, and you realize that there's so many other things that are going on that are underneath, you know what I mean, what we see. It's like, oh, you might see Tyrell acting out this way or whatever, but why is he acting out? And you start to be able to unpack or take away those layers and realize, you know what, Pat has something else going on here. You know what I mean? It's not that he's not gifted. It's not that he's not just as brilliant as everybody else, but it's like, I got these other things going on top of the fact that people have been telling me my whole life that, I'm just gonna be this type of person. And it's like, we have to go through this whole process of unpacking that, and also, you know what I mean, getting to a point of realizing that God designs each of us for a particular purpose, to do particular things. And if we realize that it gets greater later, and we keep doing the work, you know what I mean, we'll get to the greater later. But a lot of times we don't get to the greater later because it's just like, nobody cares. I don't see any future in it. And there is a lot of lessons in pain. Period. Yeah. But no, I didn't even know your story. I'm over here just like, damn, Pat's got a dope ass story. And I hate to say dope, like in a sense of like overlooking the hardships that it was, because I know it wasn't nothing dope about that when you're going through it. But when you look at the fact that, I had so many things writing me off, and I found a way to take my negatives, to take my experiences and produce the man that I am today. It's like, imagine what I could have done with the same level of confidence that I have now if I had that in the resources then. if I had the people strategically around me to do that. And so many of us, that's what we're missing. That's what we're lacking. And it's just like, but a story like yours would be able to resonate with so many people, because honestly, it's just like, yo, that story is a common story. But like as a young adult, we don't realize it. Now I can say, when I see someone moving around all of the time, and me and my boy Peyton had this conversation, I'm just like, he was like, it took me to get older to realize as a kid, I thought that was dope. I was like, I used to tell my mom, it's like, wow, you know, oh, they moved there, they moved there, they moved there. And, you know, my mom had told me, she was like, well, Tyrell, actually, that's instability for a person that's moving all over. Like, as a kid, my mind was just like, oh, you hating? It was like, nah, they got this, they moving there, they moving there, they moving there. It was like, nah, but you live long enough, you live, like I said, you get to that greater point and you realize, actually, you know, it's not as great as it seems. And you have to be able to go below the surface to realize, you know what I mean, the dysfunction there. You know,
got you.
But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Let me see. I got another question for you, right along the lines, because I know you mentioned your journey, getting your GED, Lemoyne, going to Princeton for Divinity School. Do you think education saved you or opened up doors for you? Why or why not?
Absolutely. So, like, for me, it wasn't that I wasn't smart. And I will say people who are academically successful don't necessarily have to be smart. I know stupid people with PhDs. You know what I'm saying? And I know a lot of really, really intelligent people that don't even have a GED, that are high school dropouts. But for me, it wasn't the fact that I couldn't do the work. It was a couple of different things. I think one, it was just a lack of concentration and focus. A lot, like you said, there was more present issues at certain points. But I remember, like, my mother always like had this dream of me going to Morehouse when I was a young man. And if I had to do it, like if I had the option, I would have definitely gone to a HBCU. And I will definitely be encouraging my children to go. My wife went to Dillard in Louisiana, but she in New Orleans, but she's like, I don't want to press my kids to go to HBCU. I'm like, my boys are going to an HBCU. And I think it's good because it's a place where there's very few places where Black children can be in the majority. And have a cultural experience where your culture is the prominent culture. And so I think that's why I love the ideas of HBCUs. But I will say that I remember realizing that I wasn't like gonna graduate. Like I wasn't going to, you know, go to get it, you know, graduate high school. And I remember thinking like, I will never go to college. Like I'll never be able to, you know, I'll never be able to, you know, say I'm a college graduate and everything. And then at some point, like I was working, did in jobs for like 4 years between like the time that I got my GED and the time I went to college. So by the time I went to college, I was 21. But I will say that I remember my first semester coming home and just having a very different outlook on life. I don't say that everybody should go to college because I'm, you know, I understand college is not for everybody, but you should have some kind of, you know, advanced education after high school. Because I feel like in college affords you the opportunity to try out adult life.
Yes.
You know, without all of the consequences that adult life has, you can get to try it out and you get to socialize and you get to network. Like I think a lot of us, sometimes we don't get the networking piece and the kind of setting you up for the future, right? So now the students that I have, I just talked to one of my former high school students who's now a college student, and I just told her, you know, about an RA position. She's like, well, I don't know if I'm gonna do it. It's my senior year next year. I was like, listen, that could set you up for an RD position in graduate school, and then you could go get your classes paid for because you're an employee of the institution. Like, you know, and it's all of these hacks and tricks that like we learn. By the time I tell people, like, by the time you know all of it, you're graduating, right? But it does give you an opportunity. Like, if I knew what I knew then, like if I knew now what I knew then, I would take that refund money, I would bank it and buy a property. And I would have flipped that property because at that point, the interest rate was the lowest interest rate you can get is a college loan. So get a 2-family property, flip it, or live in one, rent out the other. At this point, like the understanding of how wealth works and how business works and how, you know, these institutions, we have more resources in these institutions than like while we're there than 99% of the world. So like I got to go to Ghana in my graduate program for almost 3 months. And when it was all said and done, I might have spent like $180.
Nice.
Because the college subsidized it. I know people who parlay, you know, their degree into a scholarship program or into, you know, or into another PhD or whatever. And now they're, you know, they're academic hustling. And I'm like, you know, that's, I think it gives you access.
Yeah.
It gives you access on a level that you don't always have access on your own. Right. And then it also, I think, gives you a structure so where you can kind of start thinking in ways. Like I remember towards the end of my undergrad, I graduated with a communications degree in television and radio, but I had like a sociology, English, and philosophy minors because I was taking like we were a fine arts college anyway, so we had a core curriculum. So it wasn't too many more classes I had to take to get those minors. And then also like I studied what I loved, right? And so any course that was about Black people or any courses about race or whatever, like I was taking that. And I found out that I loved sociology. Well, by the time I was going to change my major, I was like, I was going to have to stay there for an extra year, do all this stuff. I was like, nah, I'm not going to do that. Okay. But I started thinking like a sociologist. I caught myself, I was like, I'm looking at an article or something like, oh, this would be a dope. Or I was looking at a news story on Serena Williams. Oh, that would be a dope article. This would be blah, blah, blah. Like it allows you, it opens up your mind to thinking differently.
Gotcha.
Not all schools, but you know, some schools, like you are taking these various courses and courses that you wouldn't, these books that you might not ever be exposed to, or these conversations that you would never be exposed to. And it allows you to start thinking critically and differently than you would normally. And so now you can now see life in various different aspects that you might not have been able to see it before. So I definitely think that, you know, college, and on top of that, you know, the access to certain jobs and all that kind of stuff, obviously. But yeah, I think that has definitely been a key to kind of me being where I am today.
Okay. Once again, Pat, I'm just gonna be honest. I'm loving your answers because this is like, listen, I'm probably not gonna get through the end of this because what you're saying is so much to unpack. I literally just had my nephews over here with us for the weekend, and we were just telling them like, you know, well, one, their school has them doing projects, right? So it's a project-based school. Instead of just learning chemistry the normal way, they'll wrap it into some type of project in real life. And that's what I'm telling them. I said, well, actually, that's what you want, because a lot of times, you know, we end up just learning a concept just in a book, and we never really realize how to apply it in real life. And you're like, oh, I'm never gonna see it again. But we see it. You see chemistry all day. You see math all day. You just don't know it, right? And I was just sitting there trying to break it down to him. And I was saying, imagine like if I knew what I know now back then, man, would my road had been shortened up. You know what I mean? So now I'm sitting there telling them they're getting ready for 8th grade, and I'm telling them the same thing. I said, listen, well, this is what you really want to do. You want to read more.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you can play the game, but also make time to read more. You're gonna have to learn more than what, you know what I mean, the world is saying that you need to know. No more outside of that. But also, you got so much access. They got so much access to everything right now, where it's just like, yo, you can learn to hustle. They're actually going over podcasts in 7th grade right now. And I'm just like, well, yeah,
That's
you can tell them about your uncle's podcast. So it's like, and you know, so just learning these whole things. Imagine what we could have done if we had those tools early.
Exactly.
So, but sometimes, thankfully, because you get a chance to be greater later, you can shorten up the road in the process for so many others, as I'm sure you do through your regular works. I'm just like, well, you know what? Because now you have had your own personal experience, as well as your eyes and your maturity will allow you to pinpoint, you know what? That person might need a little bit. It might be something else going on there. You know what I mean? Or, you know what I mean? Because, you know, I lived through it now. So now, you know, I get to tell everybody. Now I'm always eager about telling people about my story or a process. And one, because if I can do it, you can do it too, because I come from the same exact situations.
Right.
And then you mentioned sociology. You know, I did a interdisciplinary program at Johnson C. Smith. So I did sociology and business management. And, you know, I'm always looking at the world and how we interact with each other, why we interact with each other,
right? Exactly.
Why we don't. You know what I mean? It was just like, I was just fascinated with it. I was like, wow, this is a thing. He's just like, yeah, it's a thing.
It gave me language to stuff I already knew. Because it would, like us, like being raised in the hood, like you get to see this stuff. Just that you don't have a language for it. And then you don't even know people are studying this. What? Like, and so like that's why I love social work and in the areas of sociology so much, and especially race. I tell people everything is racist, but everything is racial. Everything is racial. And being able to see like the intersections of race, gender, of politics, of how systems enact on one another. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's dope. I love it.
And to see how it affects different communities. Like one of my sociology classes was on urban planning, right? And in it just talked about one of the topics was how the urban areas end up getting like the older and stale products, right? So one, they get it at a higher rate, right? They get it at a higher rate, and then they end up selling these older and stale products to the community, because most of the people who live in these communities don't have cars or access to go to the grocery store or to a Walmart and stuff like that. So like you said, sociology gives you a language to stuff that you have already experienced, but you never had the words for it. Yo, I promise you, as soon as I learned that, I came back home, I went into the grocery store, and to the corner store, and I started looking at all of the dates of the products in the stores. Now, mind you, I'm cool with the owners of the store because I studied Arabic, so those were my guys. But at the same time,
really? That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, but at the same time, I was insulted because I started looking at the dates on it. Some of the stuff was already stale, so it had already expired, and then they're selling it at a higher rate. You look at products like Pepsi and stuff like that, they'll end up buying it cheaper because it's closer to the expiration date, so they get it cheaper, and then they still mark up the price, and we pay more for it than what you would pay if you went to the grocery store. And from that point, like, I had never bought anything like that from out of one of the corner stores again. And it was like, I learned that through sociology. It gave me a language to speak on things that I didn't even know I was already dealing with. So I love what you just said with that.
Yeah, it's called a poverty tax. It's the same thing as like when you go into the corner store. So we weren't as cultured back then, so we used to call them the high beef shop. But like you go into the corner store and you buy a $2 something, but you got a credit card. Like, nah, my friend, we can't. We got a $5 limit, $10 limit, or whatever, and then we'll charge you an extra 50 cents. Well, that's illegal, and you never see that happening outside of the Black and communities. You never see it happening in like the Guilderlands. or you know, the Lathams. Like, you won't see that. You'll see that, you know, on Grand Street, you know, Pearl Street. So it's another tax that you're placing on poor people on top of, you know, on top of everything else. So
yeah, there was and actually I want to say, what is the guy's name? Something Rochester, but he had a book on the black tax. And he starts just talking about all these additional ways that Black people end up paying more over time just because of their race. Right. And it was just like, yeah. Well, yeah, man. Well, let me see. And this will be an interesting one too, because I know you went to a lot of different schools before you ended up going to college. Do you feel that you were ever miseducated by the public school system?
Oh yeah.
If so, how did you recognize the miseducation?
Oh, absolutely. I remember I got into an argument in class with my social studies teacher about the ways that they taught about the European slave trade. Remember that. And we were talking about, oh, well, you know, they migrated to I was like, no, they didn't migrate. They were taken and forcibly, like, bro, let's not call it a forced migration. And I remember like getting into it with, so I thought, and especially when I was in Guilderland, Guilderland was very racist, to say very racist. As a matter of fact, I had what I later recognized was a panic attack when I went back years later to watch my godbrother's moving up ceremony, but it was in the Guilderland gym. And just the experiences that I experienced there, I recognize now that what it was a panic attack. I didn't know what it was then, but I just felt really anxious. I walked out of the gym. I had to leave because I was like, I can't deal with this. And so many people. And so, but I remember one being, so Guilderland, I think they had around that time around 2,000 students, and the students of color were about 30 period. And that's not Black, that's Black, Asian, whoever, like Spanish, whatever. It was just 30 of us. And then on top of that, almost all of the teaching and leadership were white. I think I had one English teacher who was a Black woman, Tanya Manning, a shout out to her. But, and then I'm coming from Albany, right? Albany High. So I remember really being like targeted. My first day, I was 30 seconds late to a class because like I didn't know the school. I wasn't dawdling. I was getting the class over. And I remember like the teacher telling me I had detention. And the way I thought about education is we're a partner in this learning thing, right? I'm coming here to get knowledge. You're coming here to bestow knowledge or bestow some kind of wisdom so that I can use it to whatever. So I consider myself kind of like a partner in learning. They did not consider me like that. And most teachers, like now working with, educators, I understand like, yeah, most teachers aren't going to consider you like that. Most teachers like, I'm the adult, you're the child, this and then the third. So I remember getting this detention, and it was like I said, the first day she's like, oh, you have detention. I was like, oh, no, I don't. No. And I wasn't being defiant. I was like, oh, no, I don't. I'm new. Like, hey, new my first day, came in here 30 seconds late, literally 30 seconds late, whatever. She's like, oh no, you have detention. I was like, no. I'm like, I'm new. Like, I don't know the school, whatever. She's like, oh, well, do you want to have a conversation with it in the front office? I was like, oh yeah, cool. Like, it was very cordial. It wasn't no nothing. And so she sends me to the front office, and I remember meeting one of the vice principals who was racist. Both of the principals who I met ended up being very, very racist. But I remember he started asking me questions about where I came from and sizing me up, and he was like, oh yeah, you coming from Albany? Oh yeah, Albany and everything. Oh, well, you know, how many kids does Albany have in it? Oh, you don't, Okay, so how many floors does that school have? And this and that. So you mean to tell me you can get to where you have to get to in Albany, but you can't get here on time? Like he just, you know, and then there was some straight racial, like there was these kind of wannabe skinhead kids, and they would do racial, like straight up racial stuff. And I remember going into the office and reporting it, and the office would say like, what did you do to provoke me?
Ain't that the
Calling
worst?
me a monkey? He called me a monkey. You do recognize it's a racial slur, right? Like that's why he's calling me that. Well, what did you do to provoke him? And so these things like will go on. And I remember at one point I was being targeted by a teacher, and I later found out. So basically, this teacher, I can almost guarantee you, she made kind of a pact with the principal that every time she sent me out, he would write me up. Every time she sent me out, he would write. And what they were doing is they were creating a paper trail. I know it now because I'm on this side of education. They're trying to create a paper trail. And towards the end of my tenure in Guilderland, and it would be like she would write me up. Literally one time, you know, another kid was talking. She's like, "Patrick, go to the office." And the kid raises, "Oh no, that was me. That was me. I don't care. Patrick, go to the office." And I was like, "What?" And each time was more ridiculous. So I was like, in my head, I was like, "This got to be like now." It's got to be like they're gonna say side with me. And every time he was like, "Oh no, we'll just keep you here. We'll just keep you here for the you know, go sit in school for the block or whatever." We're creating a paper trail. Towards the end of my tenure, I was living in Albany at the time, going to Guilderland. So I was taking two city buses to take a school bus to get to school. I ended up waking up at I had to be at the bus at 5:15 in the morning in order to get there on time. And so towards my second year, I wasn't getting a lot of sleep. I was missing I think towards the end of it, I would come once a week because I was just missing, you know, classes. And I remember my last time, the principal, you know, pulled me in his office and he was like, you know, he closed the door. He's like, "I'm going to work to get you expelled. And if you try to fight it, I'm going to bring up your attendance record." Like he told me straight up, like, "I'm conspiring against you," you know? And I think a lot of times that the curriculum, the fact that, you know, Black kids we don't see ourselves in the curriculum sometimes, or we don't have people that look like us teaching us. Sometimes it can disillusion us. I think history is one of the most interesting things, you know, in world history is one of the interesting subjects ever. But when I was in school, I didn't like it. It wasn't until I heard about Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States that's told from the oppressed view, right? It wasn't until like Frantz Fanon's Wretched of the Earth or the ISIS, like that you get the stuff that you get in college that I started to, oh, wow, like this is the history that they, you know, hid from us. And also, like I said, like the places that teachers can go in abuse and educate. I remember my third grade teacher, a friend of mine, that's my last thing I'll say on this subject, but I recently attended a couple years ago a wedding of a good friend of mine, Bernadette Gaillard, now Bernadette Miyabi. But one of her cousins, we were at the, you know, rehearsal dinner, and she had said something. She was like, "Yo, we were in. I don't have too many people that know me from like way back, but we were in third grade together." And so she was like, she mentioned our third grade teacher, and she said, "Yo, she abused you, didn't she? Like she treated you horribly." And it took me aback because we were all joking and laughing or whatever. And I hadn't gone there in mind in a while. And it made me go back to third grade. And I remember like, this woman was abusive. She picked on me and maybe one other kid in the class who probably was autistic. Now that I know, now what autism is, he was probably autistic. But she only allowed third graders to go to the bathroom twice a day. And if you kept on asking her, she would put you in the corner until you peed on yourself. and then she would publicly embarrass you.
Mm.
I remember there were times I was always like a messy kid. She took my desk, she made me sit on the floor, and then she dumped my desk over my head, like around the class, like in front of the whole class. She called me a pig, and you sit in your filth, pig. And I remember we had a journal every morning that we had to do, and there was a prompt every morning. And years ago, I found this book. I found a journal like that we kept. And I guess my only way of kind of fighting back was to talk to her in a journal. So I was like, I don't like it when you treat me this way, when you pour my, and she never, every day she would comment and say good or whatever. Those days that I would do that, she would never comment back. And she would never mistreat me that day. And I'm like, so like those,
because she knew you recognized what was going on. You couldn't say it any other way other than writing that. I'm articulating it. And it's just like, wow.
So, those are some, I would say, to answer your question, those are some of the ways that I feel like, I was mistreated. And I guess in some ways I see that happening. A big part of me being a school social worker is an advocate.
Okay.
I always tell people, like, I'm for the student and the family, period. And so it's gotten me in trouble professionally because I'm unwilling to throw a child under the bus, or I'm unwilling to act in ways that are not full of integrity when I know that this wasn't this kid's fault. This wasn't the family's fault. This is the district's fault, or this is this teacher's fault, or this principal's fault, or whatever. So,
shout out to you. Like I said, for once again taking your experiences to empower you and motivate you to teach and to interact with the students the way you do. And Crystal Word, in her interview, she said the same thing. She was like, Tyrell, she became a teacher primarily because of how she was mistreated by her teachers. And it was just like, I never want somebody else to experience that again. So sometimes we have to be the change that we're hoping. We got to be the change that we want to create. But yeah, okay. Let me see. And actually, I know I almost just had a grin come to my face, and it shouldn't have been a grin, but it was a grin that came because earlier today we talked about what we're about to get into right now. Black community, earlier today, we got 3 guilty verdicts in the George Floyd case, which is actually going to lead me to my next question. We have dove into a lot of different areas, but we're going to go into social unrest. The Black Lives Matter movement isn't just about police brutality, but it's also about dismantling systematic racism. Right. We have one of the largest showings of unrest in what had happened with George Floyd, to the way that it activated communities of not only color, but other nationalities to say enough was enough. Right. Because, your blatant disregard for the Black man's life. Right. But Pat, I'm gonna ask you, and I can only imagine where you might go with this, but I'm gonna get this question out. If you were in charge of mobilizing a Black Lives Matter movement, what are 2 things that you would focus on? And even before you answer that, let me do this because I get bad sometimes. Let me ask this first. Okay. How does because really we don't normally have spaces to say this. So, how does hearing the guilty verdict on all 3 charges, or how does hearing the verdict today for Derek Chauvin affect you? What does that mean to you? Yeah, what does that mean to you? And then I'll go back to that question.
Got you. I will say it's a particular kind of guilty happiness. I say that because all of this comes on the backdrop. So one, let me just not discount like what just happened and the historic nature of what just happened. Because I think all of Black America was holding on with bated breath.
Yeah.
Pairing that he was going to be tried like innocent or found, guilty of a lesser charge. And the fact that he got all three counts were guilty on all three counts is amazing. Like it's mesmerizing. It's something that we did not expect. I think, when you look at the killers of Medgar Evers and the killers of Emmett Till, and then the killer of Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, and then you look at all of these historic trials where, even Botham Jean's murder, right? And the way that she got 5 years for taking this man's life, for breaking into this man's apartment and shooting him. You get 5 years? Like, so I feel like us as a Black community, we're all holding our breath. I know me personally, I didn't watch the trial. Because you know what? One, I watched the video and that was enough for me. And that did something to me. Like, I kind of a couple years back swore off of like watching the videos of Black death. But now but the thing about George Floyd, which I think is unique, which we all experienced, we're in the midst of a pandemic. Everybody was shut down. So it's almost like we were forced to watch this, right? Yep. And so you can't turn away. And so the fact that, yes, like this man has been tried, and now I don't know what the trials of the other three officers are, but I hope they get convicted of all their counts as well. It is something to be said. I was on Clubhouse when the verdicts were being read, and I was in a room of lawyers and black people and everything, and just the eruption of people, just people's elation, people's relief, and everything. It was a good thing. It made me feel like the OJ verdict. I remember I was in 6th grade when the OJ verdict came out, and I remember how I knew. As a Black person, I didn't even know why I was celebrating, but I knew I was celebrating, which was interesting. So I felt in that same space. But I say guilty happiness because this was all on the backs of George Floyd dying, right? Not only that, we doggone near had to burn the whole world down in order to get this guilty verdict. The whole world had to the whole world protested for months, and we got a guilty verdict. Now, I will say this, but we also didn't get sweeping policy change. So the comments that President Biden made, and no, he's not perfect, but I commend him for coming on national television and talking about how he was pleased with this verdict of this trial and how he talk to the victim or the family members of George Floyd, and how there must be sweeping changes and how it must be on a federal level. Like, I appreciate that. Even if I don't believe it's just talk, but even if it was, I appreciate that. It was something that Obama didn't do. Now, Obama couldn't do in the Trayvon Martin case. And I'm not gonna knock it. Oh, he didn't say, because he couldn't. I understand. As Black folks, we understand that station, right? And also he made comments before the trial. But, even him, he said, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon Martin. That's as far as he could go, but we understood what he meant. But the fact that like Biden's going even further, I appreciate. I'm also not disillusioned though.
Yep.
Because last week, while we were looking at this trial, we were also looking at the killing of Duante Wright and the young 13-year-old man whose police they claimed that he had a gun. Turns out he had his hands up when they shot him, and he was only 13 years old. Like, so we're looking at these things in real time. So I can't be so elated,
Correct,
right, that I lose focus that they're still killing us.
let's not forget the video that just came out about the soldier, the lieutenant.
Yes, that was the third thing that happened,
Yeah.
where they pepper sprayed this soldier for like an erroneous stop. And so I think about that. I think about that in light of, it's funny because on my Facebook, you get Facebook reminders. So 7 years ago today was Easter Sunday, was Resurrection Sunday. And I just wrote a quick post because I was like, it's interesting that they have this African-American man, and in Jesus, he was an African man who was crucified by the state, in state-sanctioned murder, and for crimes which should not have warranted any kind of death penalty. Now, Jesus was innocent, right? And then we're celebrating the memorial of that state-sanctioned murder. We are memorializing his resurrection, which is in a sense a vindication against the state that murdered him, and also a vindication of death itself. I find that all these years later, we're still having to celebrate vindications of death. But the only difference is George Floyd is not going to raise from the dead.
Correct.
He's not going to raise from the grave. In a sense, we will. We have the opportunity to, right? And to pick up our voices and to, do the acts of social justice that we need to do. But it didn't bring him back. Like, this guilty verdict didn't bring him back. The money that the family got, like, I'm glad on both counts, but it didn't bring them back. And so I look forward to a day. And on top of that, like I said, I have 2 little black babies.
Right.
I have 3 black sons, right? I was never more terrified. There's 2 times that I was just totally undone. One is when Eric Garner died. And it was something specifically, so I'm a Sigma, shout out, go mob to the good frat. We had our centennial in 2014, right? Now, I know you're an alpha. It's all right. It's it's all right. You know what I'm saying? Y'all got Martin Luther King. It's all right.
Everybody's entitled to make mistakes, Pat. It's all right.
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about. But I mentioned that because we were celebrating centennial around the time that Eric Garner died. And I remember coming back, and my wife told me, she said, I don't want you to see the video. And we were engaged at the time, but she's like, I didn't want to show you the video because I knew you were celebrating. And when I came back up, like, to watch that video, it did something to me. And not to say I ain't seen other videos, but the distinct thing I recognize in myself about Eric Garner is the fact that he was 55 years old. And at some point, I had thought in my mind that at some point I would age out of the crossfire. Like, I would age out, like staring at the barrel of the gun, right? I'm no longer hanging in the streets doing the things that I used to do with people. Like, I was never no hard dude, but I hung around some folks that wouldn't do, all too good. So it's like, I could understand if I got, hemmed up then, or, but I'm a little older now. I'm a little more mature. I'm kind of, I got an education and everything. And so I thought the lie that we tell ourselves is that, oh, I'm a little removed from this, right? But Eric Garner let us know you're never too old. You're never too old, never too far away. And then, so that just broke me. And then also, like, the fear that came over me when the doctor said on our first baby, like, you're having a son. And recognizing that I was going to bring a Black boy into this world. My mom said I never had a healthy sense of fear growing up for myself. That was the first time, like, I had fear in my heart, because I'm like, what am I bringing my sons into? So yet again, I'm looking at this, and while I'm happy, I'm like, there's vindication, but I would much rather it not been a situation to be vindicated in the first place.
Gotcha.
And I pray and I hope and pray that like my children, my Black boys are protected. Your Black boys are protected. Our Black girls are protected. Like it's not just men either, but like that's the heaviness that I'm feeling on this day. The fact that we even have to be here to celebrate the conviction of a man that was able to kneel on the neck of a Black man for 9 minutes. 9 minutes, and we had to watch it.
Yeah.
Like that's the heaviness and I guess the joy.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it because it's unfortunate.
Right.
Yeah, I appreciate your entire answer because it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate, and it's like you said, you know, the countless times that something like this has happened, right? It took people taking to the streets and reacting the way that they did. It took a global pandemic to put everybody where they couldn't go watch sports, they couldn't go travel, they couldn't go do it. Everyone is forced to deal with it. And, you know, those are like one of those tipping points. Those are one of those moments though. And, it did both superficially and authentically, it did create a conversation that needed to happen. Some people took the superficialness of it and ran with it, and it became a thing with it, but it did allow some authentic conversation to happen. And sometimes in situations, just like we talked about COVID, we got to talk about the positives that come out of it too. Because to get 27 million before the trial even started was a win. No, like I said, it's not going to bring them back. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that I don't want to take it out of context, but, you know, we've had so many other cases where nothing was given. Yeah, to get 3 guilty charges is amazing, but, you know what I mean? We lost another Black man's life to the point that it's engraved in everyone's minds because we've seen it. You know, that right there doesn't go away.
Right.
You know what I mean? So those things, I appreciate your answer, Pat.
Yeah.
I'm still coming back to this one.
Okay.
If you were in charge of mobilizing Black Lives Matter, what are 2 or 3 things you would like to focus on for the Black community? Or what do you think we should focus on collectively?
One, I think that we need to talk about a radical redistribution of wealth. So I always said in the pandemic, there was 3 things I feel like the policy should have, like the policies that could have had a positive effect on us. And that was 1, universal health care, 2, a living wage, and 3, a mandatory sick leave. Because if we had all the 3 of those policies, people wouldn't be scared to call for their jobs. They would have enough money to sustain themselves if they had to stay out for a while. And then also they could go to the doctor for free. So you didn't have people who were, you know, working themselves to death, even though they were sick, or even though they're contagious, to get these things. So I would say, like, in those spaces, just basic human necessities, which I outline as living wage, universal health care, job protection and sick leave. So those are some things. The dismantling of our criminal terrorist system, because we have we militarized our police forces. We have let them loose on Black and brown communities. I know that this presidency, you know, they don't want to say, oh, abolish the police or dismantle the police. I'm down for it. And you know, we always have this conversation. It doesn't mean that we won't have police, but a majority of your municipalities reflect our military, which is like 50% of the budget goes Policing, like, I'm a social worker. I'm a school social worker, but I've been in people's homes who are there in crisis. Like, I know fellow social workers that go in when somebody's in active crisis and all this kind, talk to people down, or have had to, get situations. And not every, situation needs a police officer.
Right.
They're only trained one way. Police officers shouldn't be mental health clinicians because that's not their job, right? And I believe in a space that we can kind of divest out of our policing system and criminalizing Black and brown communities, and maybe even dismantling this mass incarceration state so that we can, be less traumatized by these systems. And I guess finally, I would say providing a lot more opportunities. So this is the thing. When we talk about violence in the Black community, when we talk about, and I'm not talking about Black on Black violence is not a thing. I don't like to use that term, but when we're talking about Black community violence, or we're talking about, drug use or any kind of thing, when you bring resources and pathways out of poverty into a community, any community, they tend not to, violence just goes down, crime goes down. Because now people have, I tell people like this, if I give you a dirty glass of water and I say, here, you can drink this dirty glass of water or no water at all, what are you gonna do? You're gonna drink the dirty glass of water. But if I give you an opportunity to say, hey, I can give you some clean water, then you're gonna drink the clean water. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like if we have more opportunities, especially for young people, but for everyone, more opportunities for them to see different pathways to success and see spaces in which they see themselves in those pathways to success and supports to get them in those pathways and to keep them there, we'll see a significant drop in crime, a significant drop in poverty, a significant drop in drug use and alcohol abuse and domestic violence. Like, all of these things across the board will start to drop away, I believe.
Okay. I like that. I'm over here. Listen, I'm over here like, yeah, man, I like that. Listen, man, I'm gonna hit you with. I'm gonna give you about 2 more questions.
Okay.
Maybe 3. Before I let you go.
Okay.
What about your life's path, Pat, are you most proud of?
Me being a father and a husband, by far. I tell my wife all the time, I'm striving to be a father and to be a husband and to create a blueprint that I've never seen. Being raised as by a single mom. Shout out to my mom, Deborah Williams. She's still in Albany. You see her, you stay 6 feet away, but give her some love, give her some money. Y'all out there. But now she struggled, and I see, and also my mother was one of the champions. I've seen her do activism work since I was a kid. So, like, struggling and striving for Black people, right? Even sometimes at the expense of herself. But it was just us at times, and it left a huge deficit. I'm most proud that my children will never know what it is not to have a dad in their life.
Gotcha.
Right? I'm most proud that I'm trying my best, and I'm not always perfect, but I'm trying my best to be an attentive, husband full of integrity, somebody that my wife can not only love, but also be proud of, right? And in areas that we need help, we need help. Going to counseling, doing whatever. Like, okay, like, I'm being down for the hard work of marriage, because marriage, boy, no.
Listen, I'm over here like, listen, counseling. Even externally, the amount of work that you got to do, not to jump in and take over, but that's like Jay-Z said it, that's some of the hardest work you will ever have to do.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It forces you to look at yourself. It forces you to bring out the best in yourself, to preserve the sanctity of probably the best thing that ever happened to you.
Right. And so, like, for me, that question is easy. Me and my wife, and I'll leave it here, me and my wife always talk about, like, okay, the social justice, like, activists of, you know, yesteryear, like the Malcolm X's and the MLKs. And her theory is, like, they were failures. I was like, wait, first time she said it, I was like, what are you talking about? She's like, look at their children. Their children, like, they're suing each other. They don't barely talk to each other. She said, if you change the entire world, but then your family unit falls apart, you didn't succeed. And I was just like, dang. And it made me reevaluate. And it's right. Not only is she right, it's also scriptural, right? Our first, you know, and I'm an ordained reverend, I'm an ordained elder in my church. Our first ministry is our family unit. So it can't be out of balance, right? And so it's easy for me to say, yeah, that's what I'm most proud of. I'm most proud of being a dad. I'm most proud of being a husband, you know, and I don't take those jobs lightly at all.
I thought Patrick Robinson before you was my favorite interview. Patrick Williams quickly becoming my Let me see, man. How has traveling impacted your worldview?
Oh. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Me going out of the country, and I haven't been out much, but I always go back to Ghana because it was an opportunity for me to look at myself in a different light. So I'm always feeling like I'm very, like, pro-Black, and, you know, for the diaspora, and I still am. But I always thought, you know, we are all one Black people, right? Across the world, no matter what, this and that and the third. And I remember when I went to Ghana, it was like, I had this idea that I was returning home. Right? But it's almost like you've been kidnapped from home, but when you return home, home doesn't look like what it did. And then also they don't recognize you as being from there. And so I had people calling, you know, people called us a Bruni, which roughly they tell you it means Westerner, but the real translation is white man. It's white man. And they will call you a Bruni. They call me a Bruni. They will call the white European guy a Bruni. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm a Bruni. And I was really taken aback by that, because I was just like, I thought we were people. And, you know, I would say, I'm Black. And they're like, no, you are not Black. You're not Black. You're not Black. But to them, to me, Black is a race and it's an ideal, right? To them, it's a color. It's like, no, like, you're lighter. You're light skinned. According to them, I'm light skinned. You light skinned. But after having conversation, also, one last thing I would say, in this country, and it's really good that it pertains to this. In this country, I'm almost always seen as Black and then male, right? Those are my two identities that I show up with in anytime I walk in the room. I'm Black male. And sometimes male goes first, sometimes Black goes first, and sometimes they walk in at the same time. But rarely do I ever think of myself as American. I went over to Ghana, I was American first. And then I was male and I was not Black. I was just like, wow, like, being able to experience that from the other side made me kind of understand, and their connection to lineage. Like, one of the deacons in the church, he is Jamaican. When I told him my father was Jamaican, I'm Jamaican. Now listen, he's never been outside of Ghana. His mama got Ghanaian, daddy Ghanaian, grandma, granddaddy, all that. But because they have a deep understanding of lineage, He actually told me the story of the first missionaries that missionized, Presbyterian missionaries that missionized Ghana, right? Basically, the Europeans came over there, talked to the chiefs and said, hey, this is Jesus, you know, y'all should holler at him, right? This was like, all right, we believe you, fam, but our people ain't gonna believe you. So you need to bring us over somebody that looks like us that can story to our people. And so they went over to Jamaica and got Jamaican missionaries. And one of those Jamaican missionaries is the descendant, he's the descendant of, this deacon is the descendant of that Jamaican missionary. In the lineage, he's Jamaican. No matter how many ancestors back. And it made me think about the ways that we treat each other and the ways we would not treat each other if we understood that we came from the same lineage. Because it's hard for me to dehumanize you, to kill you, rob from you, rape you, or whatever, if I consider you my brother and sister, right? And we have a kind of this ethereal idea, but if we need to really embrace that as a Black people, and that was something beautiful. And one last thing was, I realized I'm looking at it in Christianity, in light of Christianity as well, and I recognize, like, I've came to the decision that Christianity and capitalism cannot coexist. Because capitalism in its truest form, to break down kind of capitalism, in order for some to be rich, many must be poor. Right? And Christianity kind of flies in the face of that. And I came to that decision because I was just like, I'm in this small town. I was in Akropong, which is an hour north of Accra, the capital. Accra is more kind of like city-like, and it's more, if you went like, and there's definitely an American or Westerner section, like that would be the most kind of comfortable you would be, right? After you start traveling out into the different regions, those towns are a little less developed, I would say. Like, I didn't see a grocery store the whole time I was there. And when I came back, it was jarring to me. But I recognized capitalism could not exist without, or even in these spaces of poverty. I remember I'm walking down a dirt road, right? And I'm in a city that does not have a sewer system. They have ditches that line the streets. And so in the morning, they'll take their chamber pots or their buckets, and they'll throw out their waste in the morning. So it's an exquisite, smell in the mornings. They have to go to the well and pump well water, right? And this is the difference between relative poverty and absolute poverty. So Tyrell, you said like you didn't have electricity for a time and growing up, right? In that country, there's rolling blackouts. The whole country has a blackout for 4 hours a day, every day, because the country can't afford electricity. And so that's like absolute poverty, right? But at the same time, there was a Coca-Cola sign on the side of this shack that I'm walking by. And I'm like, Coca-Cola got way out here to take these folks' money. Like, no, capitalism, no, it ain't working. What I will say, though, also is I felt a deep, as I continue to be there, because I wrestle with these things, right? I found a deep affinity for, like, I was like, I'm not from this place. And then also, I'm definitely from this place. Even in the church services, like, I saw the church mothers there, they got a whole service in tree, and I don't know what they saying, right? But I understand that rock. I understand the rock of the church mothers. I understand like that cadence of the voice. Like, I understand certain things. I'm like, that looks like my auntie. That looks like my cousin. That looks like, my auntie, my grandma, or whatever. Like, I understood that. And then I also understood that I got a chance to visit Elmina and Cape Coast. Those are the slave castles, right? We were taken from I was able to look at the door of no return, and I recognized like my ancestors had to make it. Like so they show you the cell, and the cell is like where they would put in the unruly slaves, and they would basically let them rot there, like let them die. And I was like, I wonder if my ancestors were ever in this cell. And I was like, no, stupid. They couldn't be.
So somebody had to make it.
Because I'm here. But then that hit me. I was like, wow, like, I'm here. I'm here. and you find traces of ourselves in our ancestral cousins. So in a way, I can recognize, no, I'm not Ghanaian, but in a way, like I'm definitely also like my grandfather's family did, like there's an anthropologist in the family, apparently. My mom told me, and he did the same and found out like we have family over there. But I was just like, man, like the ways that we create culture in a new country, even with people from different tribes that knew a new language, like it's like nothing else. Like we have created this tribe here in America as Black Americans. Our ancestors have created this identity, and now the whole world wants to be like us. So there was a young kid in the town close to when I was leaving, and he was walking by, and I saw he had Brooklyn on his shirt. I was like, yo, and they called one of the little eateries that they have, little bars, Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was like, so it's a wanting to embrace. We want to embrace each other, in a sense. And so I found it like I finally reconciled this a very beautiful thing. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am that, and I am not that at the same time. And I can be okay, because there is definitely a connection to the diaspora, even through all of this, even through years and generations of trauma, there's still this connection.
It's a duality. Right. And I'm gonna highlight three areas that I'm gonna have to double back to at some point, not tonight, but financial literacy, what we could do with financial literacy being the bedrock or the foundation in urban communities, how much that will change us talking about financial literacy. That whole example of, what you could do with a refund check as opposed to buying a car, buying clothes and stuff like that. Because I know on Earn Your Leisure, one of the guys from Earn Your Leisure is one of our financial advisors. So, but
nice.
So we follow him all of the time. So, but one of the people he had was a gentleman who ended up doing the same thing. He took his refund checks and started buying houses and stuff like that. So, anywho,
right.
A couple of areas that I wish I had more time to dive into would be financial literacy, mental stability, because we talked about it, but we talked around it.
Right, that's true.
I mean, a lot of the issues, or that a lot of the issues that plague us got exposed, especially with COVID. You know what I mean, on a heightened level. And as a social worker, you know what I mean, as a reverend, you know what I mean, I would love to been able to dive into that one a little bit more. And then the last one was cultural relevancy. You know what I mean? Just being able to, like you said, that duality piece, right? Just like, yeah, I know that I'm connected there, but then I'm not there. It was like, it's not until you step outside of America that now you become an American first, then a man, then a Black man. You know what I mean? Right. It was just like, I lived in Morocco, and it was just like,
wow.
Morocco changed my life. And I went to Morocco after 9/11. So after the time period where everyone is stereotyping those from the Middle East or Arabs, and you know what I mean, it was all of that. It was just like, listen, that experience changed my life to the point that I came back as a different person. I came back as a different person, literally. And it was just like those impacts, that connection, because a lot of people don't even understand the history of Morocco. And it was like how powerful the Ottoman Empire was in taking over all of this joint. And it'd be like, so I would have loved to, and as a fellow sociologist, I just think that we would make for great conversation. So I'm sure we would have to revisit that also in your project that's coming up. But for a different reason. But Pat, speaking to you has been refreshing.
Oh man, God bless you, bro.
Yeah.
Same here. Like
Yeah.
I appreciate this conversation. Absolutely. And listen, let me just say one thing. I appreciate, I said it in the beginning, but I really do appreciate what you're doing. It is very important for people, and especially young people. It doesn't like young people our age, older people, to see somebody who is from the neighborhood, who knows the struggle, and who's able to not only overcome but also, you know, teach others how to do it. I have a line in a poem that says, you know, how does it go? I said, don't settle, for there's making tsunamis with your words and monsoons with your ideas, and then swim there and then come back and come get us. Like, there's some people that are called to go and come back, and I see that you are one of those that are called to go and come back. So thank you for doing what you're doing. God bless your work, sir. This is ministry, whether you know it or not. This is ministry.
And I will willingly accept that. And I believe I know that and understand it to a certain extent, but I truly appreciate the appreciation for it. And it's like I said, man, it's a labor of love. And I ultimately do know it's God's work. You know what I mean? Like I said, man, if you, the full story, the unadulterated story would be, you know what I mean? We would be here for hours for the both of us. But it is rewarding to be able to highlight a Patrick Williams, you know what I mean? And be able to say, listen, you know what? We got more in common than what you actually, than what the surface level would have you thinking. And that's what I learned in Morocco. It was just like, we have more in common with each other than what we actually think of.
Right.
Even in the hood, it's just like, you know, I grew up on one side of town, beefing with other people from the other side of town, but we got more in common with some of the people from the other side of town. So it takes us to get to, once again, that level of maturity of realizing that, you know, we actually got a lot more in common with one another if we have the tools and the resources and the time to take the opportunity to listen. So Pat, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to listen. And the back community, man. I think that we've all been blessed with tonight's guest. So Pat Williams, I really want to say thank you again. Thank your wife. Thank the kids.
Thank you, my brother.
For allowing me to steal you. Last question for tonight.
Okay.
If you are reading any type of books, are you watching any type of podcast? What type of things are you staying into, social media accounts that you follow that you might be able to pass on to the back community to get us involved in some of that work?
Yeah. Hold on. I'm gonna pull this book out. I think if I have it in here, man. Nope, I don't have it. But I will say with podcasts, check out The Nod. They're doing new episodes, but it's a podcast. The tagline is Blackness is greatest fans. And basically they explore everything Black. I think one of their first episodes I found out was about like grape soda. So orange is a grape soda. And then they got a Nuck If You Buck episode giving into the Nuck If You Buck. Like it's dope. Like, it's dope. Also Uncivil. Uncivil is by Chinchirai Komenyika and Jack Hitt. They're not doing any new episodes, but they are taking history, if anybody's interested in like the real history of George Washington or the real history of slave revolts, like that kind of stuff, like that's what they're talking about. And there's one who they really outlined the first slave ever recorded in this country, and then how they took indentured servitude and they turned it into slavery through the court system. And so that's really dope. I used that for a teaching with high school kids that I did, and they were blown away as I was. There is LeVar Burton Reads. I don't know if anybody's interested in. Yes, the Read a Rainbow dude, Butterflies in the Sky. Like, so he has a podcast where he reads these short stories. It's like adult short stories, and they're dope, and they're super dope. Like I love, listening to that podcast. Bronzeville is another podcast. Is by the Tate brothers, Lorenz Tate and Lamar Tate, and then they have Lawrence Fishburne along with them, and it's a audio drama about the golden age of Chicago, the black Chicago called Bronzeville. What else? Is it the 1667 Project? Yeah, I think it's the 1667 Project. They have 5 episodes, but they're very informative. Talking about Reconstruction and slavery in America, but the way that they unravel it is just beautiful. Can you tell I'm a podcast head? In the Dark chronicled this criminal case of this man who was convicted in Mississippi 7 times and had his conviction thrown out because the prosecutor was racist. It's like season 2 of In the Dark. Kiesi Layman was the book I was thinking of. Heavy. Kiesi Layman's Heavy. Ta-Nehisi Coates, Between the World and Me, which I think is really, it was a book that Ta-Nehisi wrote his son.
Turned that into that HBO thing.
Yeah, and then he turned it into an HBO. Yeah, but the book it's like real thin, but it's so deep. It took me forever to finish it, just because it's so heavy, and I think it's very relevant for this time when we're talking about police brutality, race, and all of that kind of stuff. The Bible. The Bible, people.
Yep.
There's some dope stuff in the Bible. Listen. I read the Bible. I only read the Bible like y'all watch Love and Hip Hop. Like, there's some shady stuff in the Bible.
Yep.
So,
listen, wait. I'm not gonna let you go away from that one. The Bible is dope, right? Yeah. And it's like the same. It's and I hope I don't miss the thought where I'm going with it. It's kind of like the way we look at older people, right? We always be like, they don't know what they're talking about.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Like, actually, if you sit down and listen to the stories, our elders did the same exact.
Grandma was throwing that thing back at the Cotton Club. Back in her day.
The Bible is the same way. And it's just like, so every type of scenario is laid out here. Now, whether or not we got the eyes, the ears, the heart, the connection to understand it and put it in today's terms is another thing. But yeah, I'm glad you added that one on there, man. And there's so many different ways of dissecting it now, where you don't just got to focus in on the King James version, because that deterred me at one point because I wasn't able to get it. But what I did was, and me and my pastor at the time, Pastor Covington, we used to go back and forth, because I used to, one of my supervisors was a Jehovah's Witness, right? So she had given me the children's Bible, right? And I used to, information is information. God is God for me, right? So she gave me the children's Bible, and what it did for me was it actually helped me to find a way to get better connected with the King James version. So what I would do was I would read the stories in the kids' Bible as an adult, right? As an adult, I would read the kids' version. Then I would take the actual the living word translation, living translation. What is it? Whatever the L I think the LIV, whatever it was. You know what I mean? To break it down.
Translation?
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Yeah. To break it down into layman's for me, and then I would go to the King James version, right? Because through those 3 stages, it helped me to build my confidence with understanding what I was reading. And though it may not have been how other people would say you should learn it, that's what worked for me. And me and my pastor time, he's like, "How do I throw that book away?" I'm like, "Nope, I don't care what you say. This has Jews and information in here for me, and it's working for me." Period.
I will say this: I side with your pastor because it was because I never knew, I never read Jehovah's Witness Bible, right? And I remember them arguing with me, like I was, having a conversation. I don't really argue with folks over faith or whatever. I love how another elder in my church says, she's like, I'm just a beggar trying to tell another beggar how to get a piece of bread, period. And I can say, okay, this is how I understand it, this is how I interpret it, but I'm not trying to, get into a struggle or whatever. But what I will say, they the lady gave me like a Jehovah's Witness Bible. Some of those scriptures are different than our scriptures. And some of the scriptures have been changed intentionally. Because I asked her, well, is Jesus the Messiah? Is something? No, he's not. Like in this scripture, you see boom, boom, boom. And I'm looking at my Bible and it says something totally different. Sometimes we gotta, the Watchtower Society, that's a whole conversation. Anyway, but I'm glad it worked for you, brother. I'm glad it worked for you.
That's right.
And the truth is, God can call us he could use anything, and so I appreciate, that it definitely worked for you. So
okay. And I appreciate
get rid of that vibe. No, I'm playing.
Nah, it is still here. It ain't going nowhere. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, man. I'm gonna leave that there because I'm gonna leave that there. But that's the thing. There is knowledge and beauty almost everywhere. Some of it can be taken out of context, but at the end of the day, you had to decide who you are as a person. None of us was there at the beginning of time, right? So ultimately, it boils down to faith. It boils down to what will make you, him or her, a better person. And
I ain't gonna argue with you. I'm gonna pray for, like, I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm saying people. The best thing you could do for folks is pray for them. I remember a testimony of a admitted Satanist who was a Satanist, and he was like a high-ranking Satanist and all this kind of stuff. And like he considered himself a vampire, all this kind of stuff. He said he would pay his dues to the Church of Satan every year, right? He said one time he took it to the office of the postal office, and there's an old black woman behind the desk, and she saw where he was mailing it to. She said, "I'm gonna pray for you." And after that, he said nothing in his life was right. Like everything was crumbling, his health, everything, until he came into the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Like, and he said he never had the script. So I do believe that prayer works. You know what I'm saying? No matter what. So, look, God, like I said, God can use anything. So he used Jehovah's Witness Christian Bible. One of my old pastors said he snuck to church behind some girl he was trying to chase and end up getting saved. You know what I mean? Like, One last thing I'll say, and it's really quick for those who are interested in mental health services, psychologytoday.com is one resource where you can find, and I'm not endorsing whatever, but it's a database really. I know there's people, when they ask me, hey, what kind of therapist should I use? What kind of this, what kind of that? But psychology, and people don't know where to look, right? You can call your health insurance company. They can give you a list of people who are approved if you have health insurance. But also psychologytoday.com is a resource that you can use to see therapists in your area. Black Therapists Rock, Therapy for Black Men, I think it's either Therapy for Black Men or Therapy for Black Boys, Therapy for Black Girls. But whatever it is, like, get some help. And there's typically, if you're insured or you're not insured, typically some therapists have sliding scales. There might be a grant program in your neighborhood or in your community where they'll pay for your therapy. Typically, if you're working a job, if your job has an employee assistance program, you provide like 5 or 6 sessions, depending on what the job is or whatever, for free. It's a part of your employee support program at your job. So I would say for Black folks, talk to somebody.
Yeah,
because this is a lot. There's a lot just being Black, but especially being Black during this time. Talk to some folks, and you'll definitely feel better. I do it. My wife has done it. We've done it as a couple. Like, ain't no shame in our game. You know what I'm saying? And there's everybody that I know at some point. My pastor, who is a trained psychologist, like, she has a therapist because she says, the tow truck needs a tow truck every once in a while.
That's right.
So yeah.
Right. That's right. Hey, listen, man. Hey, Pat, you are a dope individual.
Man, I'm just trying to be like you when I grow up.
Hey, listen, man. I'm leaving it right there. The Black community, thank you for staying engaged with us throughout tonight's conversation. We talked about so many things. And Pat, I can't wait to deliver your story to the people, brother. You have yourself a wonderful night. I wish you nothing but continued success, and I look forward to catching up with you on your project soon.
You as well, brother. God bless.
God bless.